The dark night dominated everything in that small town, and the small handful of students staying at the hotel for their university trip didn't differ much from the rest of the places in the town. But that wasn't the only strange thing about the place. Alex and her friend began to feel a sense of anxiety and fear when they entered their room at the hotel. The crawling family on the moldy walls in the room was one of the terrible details that began to make them suspicious of the place. The furniture was old and worn, and the imagination room was dark and eerie beyond. It was scary enough to make them wonder if there was something dangerous waiting for them in that room. When Alex and her friend decided to go to sleep, they began to feel drowsy, but they couldn't sleep because of the terrifying atmosphere in the room. In the quiet night, Alex received a strange call on her mobile phone, but she decided to ignore it because she didn't know who the caller was. However, things quickly began to slide downhill. During the night, they began to hear strange noises, and there was something moving in the room. When Alex turned on the light, she saw something strange in the far corner of the room. There was someone standing in the darkness, and he seemed to be watching them. The girls began to scream and shout, but there was no one to answer their calls. Then the noises subsided, and they finally managed to fall asleep in the early hours of the morning. In the early morning, the girls decided to leave the hotel immediately, but they found that the place had been securely closed after midnight. It was a surprise they never expected. They were trapped in the hotel, and there was no way out. While the girls were trying to find a way to escape, Alex noticed something else, even stranger and more terrifying. There was a mysterious message written on the wall near them: "You are not alone." The girls began to feel panic and fear, and the hotel now seemed like a prison with no escape. They began searching for a way out, wandering through the old, dark corridors amid the terrifying sounds coming from the cracked walls. The girls couldn't accurately identify the source of the sound. In the end, they found a secret gate buried in the wall that could hardly be seen, leading to a secret room in the hotel. When they entered the secret room, they found themselves in a horrific basement containing even more terrifying and bizarre things. There were decomposed bodies and open medical tools, and the atmosphere in the room was cold, dark, and extremely terrifying. The girls began to scream and shout, but there was no one to answer their calls. In the end, the girls managed to find a way out and escape from the haunted hotel, and when they reached the outside, they found the town police waiting for them. It was revealed later that the hotel was known for criminal activities taking place there, and there were many victims who lost their lives in that terrible hotel. The university trip was very close to turning into a disaster, but in the end, the girls managed to survive and escape from this terrifying place.
As a group of high school students, we were excited to visit the newly opened zoo in town. The zoo had a reputation for having rare and exotic animals that we had never seen before. Our class of 30 students was divided into groups of 6, each led by a teacher. My group included my best friend, Maya, and 2 other classmates. We were fascinated by the different enclosures, but there was one that caught our attention, the nocturnal animal exhibit. It had a man-made cave entrance that led to a dark room with fake stars and the sound of crickets. We entered the room and were immediately captivated by the bats, owls, and other animals that only came out at night. Suddenly, we heard a loud bang, and the door to the exhibit shut behind us, leaving us in total darkness. We tried to open the door, but it was locked from the outside. We were trapped, and panic started to set in. After a few minutes of feeling around for any way out, we heard footsteps approaching. We thought it was our teacher coming to rescue us, but it wasn't. It was a man in a zookeeper uniform who started to approach us with a knife. He demanded that we stay quiet and follow him. We were terrified and didn't know what to do. We had seen enough horror movies to know that this was not going to end well. The man led us through a few dark passageways, and we could hear the sound of other animals in the background. We finally emerged outside, and we realized that we were in the middle of the forest. The man opened the trunk of his car and instructed us to get in. We knew that we couldn't comply with his demands, so we decided to run. We ran as fast as we could, dodging trees and branches until we reached the main entrance of the zoo. We were relieved to see our classmates and teachers waiting for us. We quickly explained what had happened, and the police were called. The man in the zookeeper uniform was caught, and it was revealed that he had a history of kidnapping children. But the horror didn't end there. We discovered that the park had been attacked by a group of predatory animals that had escaped their cages due to severe storms. These animals roamed throughout the park, attacking everything in their path. Fear gripped the area, and visitors and workers alike tried to survive in this terrifying rampage. Police and rescue teams began to arrive, but the situation was so dire that they couldn't control it. In the end, the park was closed, and the animals were returned to their cages. That night would never be forgotten, and it was an incredibly terrifying experience. This incident was a reminder that nature can be harsh and scary at times, and that we should always be cautious when visiting the wilderness and zoos. It was later revealed that the zoo had been built on an ancient burial ground, and that the spirits of the dead had been awakened by the construction. The zoo was closed down, and the land was reclaimed by nature. Looking back, we are grateful that we managed to survive, but we can't help but wonder how many other people weren't as lucky as we are. The incident taught us that danger can lurk in unexpected places, and it is imperative that we be prepared for any situation.
I knew State Gardens when I was a child in elementary school. At that time, the school used these gardens as a field activity, taking us there to teach us about plants, wildlife, and nature-related topics in general. If I remember correctly, I was in 1st or 2nd grade when this happened. The school planned a new field trip to one of the state gardens, where our entire class rode on a bus, and we were about 40 to 50 people. It was not easy to keep track of everyone, but the trip was going well, and it eventually reached lunchtime. I decided to spend a fun day at the state garden, where I wanted to enjoy myself. When we arrived at the park, we walked around the area designated for animals and plants, and the dense and beautiful trees surrounded us on all sides. Suddenly, I noticed a person wandering alone among the trees, moving strangely and frighteningly. We had no idea who he was, but we didn't pay him much attention and continued walking. But at the same time, we began to feel that something strange was happening in the park, where vulgar and strange sounds were coming from nearby trees. As we walked, I noticed another person hiding behind the trees, watching us carefully. When we spoke to him, he didn't respond and continued to watch us in a creepy way. Suddenly, we heard a sound coming from the trees, and the person we were watching at first quickly ran away. After a moment, we felt that we were being chased by an unknown person, which was really terrifying. We tried to escape, but he managed to reach us and attacked us violently. While we struggled with him, we noticed the arrival of another person, a police officer who was patrolling the area. He entered into a struggle with the attacker and managed to control him and arrest him. When we asked the officer about the attacker's identity, he told us that they had been looking for him for a long time, and that he was a dangerous criminal who was escaping justice. After that, the park turned into a place of horror and fear, and we could no longer enjoy any more activities. But that wasn't enough, as shortly after that, our friend was kidnapped by a group of masked people, and we couldn't find her. The police were searching for her for a long time, but they couldn't find her. Weeks of searching passed, and the police found our missing friend's body cut into small pieces. It turned out that she was our missing friend. In the end, the people who kidnapped our friend were not found, and the reason for the strange events that happened in the park was not revealed. These questions puzzled and occupied our minds, and we couldn't forget what happened on that terrifying day in State Garden.